Hello, we have a few minutes until 10 o'clock, so we will give some individuals more time to log in, and then we will get started at 10 o'clock. So just a couple minutes here. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is 10 o'clock. Thank you for joining me. Many of you know me from working together over the past several years, but for those of you that don't, my name is Jessica Pavogel, and I manage the Homeownership Set-Aside Program, otherwise known as HSP. In the past, our trainings have consisted of webinars or videos that take an in-depth look at HSP. This year, we're going to try something different. During today's webinar, I'll go over a few of the basic 2021 round details and key changes, but I'll mainly focus on the most common errors that we see and how to prevent those errors. We do have resources available on the HSP public website that provides an in-depth overview of HSP. Those documents are listed on your screen, and I will show you where you can access them on our public website on the next few slides. I know we are all very busy, so I'm going to try to limit the webinar to around 30 minutes. If you have any questions during or after the webinar, please email us and we'll respond to your questions as soon as possible. The HSP email address that you can send questions to is listed at the bottom of this slide, which is the HSP at FHLBTopeka.com. And I think many of you are familiar with that email address. As I mentioned earlier, we provide in-depth training documents on our public website. The address is listed at the top of this slide. The home page of the public website provides basic round information. Once the round opens, an updated funds remaining balance will be posted on this page. The balance on this page is only updated once a day, typically in the morning. An up-to-date real-time balance is available anytime on your dashboard when you log into HSP Online. From the home page, you can navigate to the 4 tabs at the top of the page: registration, education, training, and resources. On the training tab, you will find the HSP user guide and the income calculation guide. The HSP user guide provides an in-depth review of HSP and step-by-step instructions on how to use HSP Online. The Income Calculation Guide details income documentation requirements and how to calculate income for HSP. The 2021 HSP overview slides follow along the HSP user guide, providing an in-depth review of HSP. The HSP income calculation slides provide basic income calculation information, such as documentation requirements and how to complete the ICW. The slides for today's webinar can also be found on this tab. The recording of this webinar will be posted on this tab probably by early next week. The Resources tab is where you will find all of the forms and documents for HSP. It's a good idea to save this tab as a favorite on your computer. You'll need to visit it often to obtain income calculation workbooks and real estate retention agreements for each household. A few details about the 2021 HSP. The round opens on March 1st. Just like last year, the maximum grant per household is $5,000 and the minimum is $2,500. The member limit has not changed either. It will remain at $25,000 per member per month. Many members ask where the grant funds come from. Federal regulation requires FHLBanks to allocate 10% of their net earnings to affordable housing. 35% of those funds are allocated to HSP. This year, there is $4.59 million available. Due to the unprecedented events of 2020, the allocation is significantly less this year than it was last year. Because of this, it is more important than ever to prioritize households that are of greatest need. If you have any questions about this or would like to discuss specific household details, please email or call us. A few changes have been made to the program. In the past, we have utilized MRB and HUD income guidelines. Kansas eliminated their bond program, so we are no longer able to utilize MRB income guidelines, as we have to use the same type of guideline for each state. Because of this, we have switched to the USDA income guidelines. Income guidelines will be updated within a couple months of USDA publishing the 2021 limits. So it's very important that you obtain a new ICW from the Resources tab for each household. Do not save the ICW on your computer and reuse it for multiple households. If an outdated version is provided, clarification will be sent to obtain the most recent version, and the reservation approval will be delayed. Income limits in the most recent version of the ICW, with an effective date of February 12, 2021, can be found on the Resources tab of the HSP public website. Another change for 2021 is that an appraisal is only required in the case of real estate owned. For example, if your institution foreclosed on the property and are now selling it, but also financing the home and obtaining HSP grant funds for the home buyer, an appraisal is required to be provided at reservation submission. An appraisal is no longer required if your institution simply holds the mortgage or lien. The past couple years, we've had some issues with reservations and disbursements going stale. For example, we will request clarification or follow-up and receive no response for several days, even months. Effective for the 2021 HSP, if requests for clarification, correction, or follow-up are not submitted within 30 days, FHLBank staff may withdraw the reservation or disbursement, which means funds will no longer be reserved for the household. To prevent this from happening, make sure that you are reading the emails that HSP Online sends out when clarification is requested and respond to the clarification request quickly. The most significant change for the 2021 HSP is the first-time homebuyer definition. In the past, only one homebuyer had to qualify as a first-time homebuyer. Effective for the 2021 HSP, all borrowers and owners of the transaction must qualify as a first-time homebuyer per FHLBank definition, which is provided on this slide. In addition, a divorced individual that only owned a home with a former spouse no longer qualifies as a first-time homebuyer. The divorced individual would have to wait the 3-year period from the end of ownership date. The majority of homebuyers are going to qualify under the first bullet point, which is that they have had no ownership in a residence in the last 3 years. All right, let's test your knowledge on the updated first-time homebuyer definition. In this scenario, Tom and Susie are married and want to purchase a home. They currently live in the home that Susie purchased prior to their marriage. Tom has never purchased or owned a home. Are Tom and Susie eligible for HSP grant funds? No, they do not meet the FHLBank definition of first-time homebuyer. Susie owns a home. The updated definition requires all borrowers and owners of the transaction to meet the FHLBank definition of first-time homebuyer. Since Susie has owned a home in the last 3 years, she is not considered a first-time homebuyer. Also, keep in mind, the spirit and intent of HSP is to help households obtain home ownership for the first time. HSP grant funds are not intended to assist with households upgrading to new homes. Let's take a look at another scenario. Jenny's divorce was finalized 2 years ago. Jenny owned a home with her former spouse, which was sold last year. Is Jenny eligible for HSP grant funds? If you answered no, you're correct. Jenny has owned a home within the previous 3 years and does not meet the FHLBank definition of first-time homebuyer. She must wait 3 years from the sale of her marital home to qualify as a first-time home buyer under FHLBank's definition. If you have any questions about the updated first-time homebuyer definition or want to run a specific scenario by us, please reach out by emailing or calling. The first-time homebuyer definition concludes the changes to the 2021 HSP. Now I'd like to go over some common errors that we see and how to prevent them. Many times during disbursement review, we discovered that not all of the household members and their income were disclosed at reservation. FHLBank's definition of household includes all individuals who currently or will occupy the residence. The household members and their income, if applicable, are required to be disclosed on the income calculation workbook. It is important that the loan application requirements and the grant reservation requirements are kept separate. Although you may not have to disclose all household members for the loan application, you do have to disclose all of them for the HSP grant. This includes the disclosure of non-borrowing relatives and non-relatives. Always ask the homebuyer who will be living in the home. The homebuyer doesn't know what information you need, so you have to ask. Let's take a look at some common scenarios. Patrick and Brittany are engaged. Patrick is purchasing a home and the loan will close prior to the wedding date. Brittany will not be on the home loan. Does Brittany need to be disclosed as a household member? Yes, she intends to occupy the home. Brittany and her income must be disclosed in the ICW. In this scenario, the home loan is closing prior to the wedding date. However, regardless if the home loan is closing prior to the wedding date or after, a fiance intends to live in the home at some point in the near future and should always be disclosed as a household member. Let's try another one. Jill and Shane are married with 3 children. Shane cannot qualify for a home loan due to poor credit, so Jill is obtaining the loan in her name only. In this scenario, who should be disclosed as household members? If you answered Jill, Shane, and their 3 children, then you are correct. Jill and Shane's income, as well as any children's income if they're age 18 and older, must be disclosed. Again, it is really important to keep the loan and grant guidelines separate and follow both for their corresponding program. Although Shane's income isn't being used to qualify for the loan, his income does have to be considered for the HSP grant qualification. Another common error we see is transactions that include non-occupying co-borrowers and non-occupying co-owners. Non-occupying co-borrowers and co-owners are not allowed. For HSP grant qualification, apply FHLBank's definitions of co-borrower and co-owner to the situation. Do not use your institution's definitions to determine HSP grant eligibility. As the definition on the screen states, a co-borrower would be an individual included on the deed, mortgage, deed of trust, and promissory note. Non-occupying co-borrowers are not allowed. A co-owner is defined as an individual that is included on the deed and/or mortgage deed of trust. Non-occupying co-owners are not allowed. However, non-occupying co-signers are allowed. FHLBank definition of co-signer is an individual included on the promissory note, but not included on the deed or mortgage deed of trust. Again, make sure you are applying FHLBank's definitions to the transaction to determine eligibility. Let's test your knowledge on non-occupying co-borrowers, co-owners, and co-signers. Lance and Ashley have filed for divorce. Ashley is purchasing a home and the loan is scheduled to close prior to the divorce being finalized. Since they are still married, Lance will have to sign the deed as an owner at the loan closing, even though he will not be living in the home with Ashley. Is Ashley eligible for HSP grant funds? No. Lance is considered a non-occupying co-owner, which is not allowed. Ashley will not be eligible for HSP grant funds until the divorce is final. Therefore, the reservation cannot be submitted until the divorce is final. In another scenario, Ben is a recent college graduate. He recently started his first job since graduating college and wants to purchase a home. Ben's debt to income is high due to his large student loan payments, and he hasn't been on his job very long. Because of these factors, his lender will only make the loan with a strong co-borrower. Ben's mom, Jane, agrees to be a co-borrower. Is this scenario eligible for HSP grant funds? No. Jane is a co-borrower and included on the mortgage deed of trust and is not occupying the home. Non-occupying co-borrowers are not allowed. One more scenario and then we'll move on. Sarah has minimal credit history. Her debt to income is excellent, but her lender needs a strong cosigner. Sarah's grandfather, Henry, agrees to cosign. Henry will not be occupying the home Sarah purchases. Is this scenario HSP grant fund eligible? If you answered yes, you're correct. Henry is not occupying the home, but is only signing the note, which makes him a non-occupying cosigner. Non-occupying cosigners are allowed. To summarize, all individuals that are part of the transaction must occupy the home and their income must be disclosed. The only exception to this is a non-occupying cosigner, which is allowed. Again, make sure you're using FHLBank's definitions to determine eligibility for HSP grant funds. Another common error we see is allowing cash back to home buyers. Cash back is not allowed under any circumstance. If a home buyer receives cash back, the member reimbursement will be reduced by the cash back amount. In addition, the RERA must be released and a new RERA will have to be executed and recorded for the reduced reimbursement amount. In the end, allowing cash back ends up costing your institution money. Correcting the CD and collecting the funds from the home buyer after the loan has closed is not an option. Cash back must be cured prior to the loan closing. As you can see on this slide in Section L, it shows highlighted in red the homebuyer receiving a $5,000 grant and $500 cash back. This can be cured prior to the loan closing by either reducing the grant amount or applying a principal reduction. The next two slides show how members commonly cure cash back on a CD prior to the loan closing. This is not how your institution has to correct the CD. You should correct it per your institution's policies and procedures. The first option is reducing the grant amount on the CD. In Section L, highlighted in green, the HSP grant is reduced from $5,000 to $4,500, resulting in zero due at closing. The second option is applying the extra grant funds to the principal of the loan. In Section K, a principal reduction of $500 is applied. In Section L, the HSP grant remains at $5,000 and the cash to close is zero. Reducing the grant amount and applying a principal reduction are the most common ways that we see members cure cash back to the home buyer. Other options, such as reducing seller credits, is allowed. It is up to each member to determine the best option for their home buyer's situation. Feel free to reach out to us if you need help curing cash back prior to a loan closing. We are always happy to discuss the options with you. This past HSP round, members faced a variety of homebuyer education issues that can easily be prevented. The homebuyer education requirement is a reg. We cannot fund a disbursement request unless the homebuyer has received homebuyer education. We will accept homebuyer education courses if the provider is accepted by HUD, Fannie, Freddie, or has adopted the national standards for home ownership education and counseling. Links to these websites are available on the Education tab of the HSP public website, as well as in the 2021 HSP User Guide. Fannie's Framework and Freddie's Credit Smart are Fannie and Freddie courses, therefore approved by Fannie and Freddie, so we will accept them. On the HUD and National Industry Standards websites, you can enter the state and they will provide approved providers in that state. If the homebuyer takes the course through an online platform such as eHome America, ensure that the provider of the course is approved. eHome America is not the provider of the course. A couple of other tips. If the course is taken online, make sure the homebuyer signs the certificate. Many times we receive certificates that are not signed, and we have to send the request back for clarification, which delays reimbursement funding. While it's not required, we highly recommend that you require the homebuyer to take the course prior to the loan closing. Disbursement requests have to be submitted within 90 days of approval. If the homebuyer has not taken the homebuyer education course, the disbursement request cannot be submitted, and it can sometimes be difficult to get a homebuyer to do something for you once the loan has closed. So best practice would be to require the course completion prior to the loan closing. Timely submission of disbursement request is imperative. Request to revert expiration dates is the most common exception request we receive from members. Once the reservation is approved, you have 90 days to submit the disbursement request. The grant expiration is updated on your dashboard, as shown on this slide. In addition, 30 days prior to the grant expiration date, HSP Online sends a reminder email to all contacts associated with the reservation. Do not ignore the email reminders. When the grant expires, the funds reserved for the household are transferred back to the allocation, and any member can reserve the funds. Unfortunately, this can and has resulted in members not being reimbursed for the grant funds. I can't say enough how important it is that you make sure disbursement requests are submitted prior to grant expiration. An important piece to making sure disbursement requests are submitted prior to the grant expiration is knowing what the statuses in HSP Online mean. Statuses can be viewed on the dashboard and on the reservation or disbursement home screens. Status descriptions can be found on page 25 of the 2021 HSP User Guide. One of the biggest misconceptions is that when the status is pending, it's submitted. This is not true. If the status has the word pending, it has not been submitted. Pending means we are waiting on you, the member, to submit the reservation or disbursement to us. Reservations and disbursements will expire in pending status. Make sure you select Submit on the reservation or disbursement home screen. Once you have submitted, the status will update from pending to submitted, and all contacts associated with the transaction will receive an email confirming submission. Timing is a big factor that contributes to smooth and successful participation in HSP. Every year, we receive requests to expedite reviews. Reservations and disbursements are reviewed in the order of receipt. We will not honor a request to expedite. Please give us plenty of time to review your submissions. Submit the reservation as part of your loan processing responsibilities. Appraisers and title companies are given time to provide their services. The same timing should be allowed for HSP reservations. We ask that you allow 15 days for us to approve your reservation and schedule your loan closings accordingly. However, if we have to ask for additional information, explanations, or clarification, the approval may be delayed longer than 15 days. Here are some tips for a quick approval. Know the income calculation guidelines. Submitting too much documentation or the wrong documentation will cause a delay. Don't ignore emails from HSP Online. Emails are sent when clarification is requested. Log into HSP Online and determine what is needed to cure the clarification request and submit quickly. Designate 1 or 2 individuals to manage your reservations and disbursements. Our most successful members have 1 or 2 individuals that manage HSP. They are marked as contacts on the additional contact screen in HSP Online and receive all notification emails. They know the grant guidelines and how HSP Online works, including what the statuses in HSP Online mean. Remember, if the status has the word pending, we are waiting on you and cannot review the reservation or disbursement. Ultimately, a quality submission is the only way to guarantee a quick approval. Successful members also make a habit of visiting the HSP website to obtain forms for each household. They do not save HSP documents on their computer. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, income calculation workbooks and real estate retention agreements should never be saved on your computer to reuse for multiple households. These documents are updated periodically, sometimes in the middle of a round. If an outdated version is used, clarification will be sent to obtain the current version. This has been a common issue for several members the past couple HSP rounds, especially with the RERA. When an outdated version is executed and recorded, we have to send a release to the member. The member is responsible for paying for the release and paying for the recording of another RERA. When the round opens on March 1st, the ICW with an effective date of February 12, 2021, and the RERA with an effective date of February 3rd, 2020 are the correct forms to use. However, these forms may be updated during the 2021 HSP round. If you currently have any forms saved on your computer, delete them. Make the Resources tab as a favorite on your computer and visit it each time you need to obtain a document for a household. Let's test your knowledge with a couple scenarios. Hank is preparing 2 reservations for 2 different households. Hank obtains an ICW from the HSP website. After completing the income calculation for the first household, Hank uses the same ICW to complete the income calculation for the second household by deleting the first household's information and entering the second household's information. Did Hank follow best practices when preparing the ICWs? No. Hank should have obtained a new ICW from the HSP website for the second household. Many times, ICWs are submitted with information from multiple households because the preparer failed to delete all of the previous household's information. This delays reservation approval. Let's take a look at another scenario. Amanda is preparing a loan closing for a household that is approved for HSP grant funds. Amanda has a RERA saved on her computer from the previous HSP round and uses it to prepare a RERA for the household to sign at the loan closing. Did Amanda follow best practices when preparing the loan closing documentation? No. Amanda should have visited the HSP website and obtained a new RERA for the loan closing. The RERA should never be saved on your computer to reuse for multiple households. If you are unsure what version of the ICW or RERA you should be using, please contact us for help. Next up is income. We don't have time today to go over income calculation in depth, but I do want to go over a few items. Income documentation. We only require one pay stub or a VOE, not both. We prefer a pay stub. Make sure the income document accurately represents a normal pay period regarding hours worked or paid per pay period. Complete the ICW with the income document that you are providing us. All information in the ICW must be verified with the income document. On page 5 of the AHP HSP Income Calculation Guide, you can find our income documentation requirements. We ask that you do not provide documentation in excess of what is needed. For example, we only need a tax return if the home buyer is self-employed, and we only need the tax return for the most recent year. Do not provide tax returns or W-2s for a salary or hourly wage earner. Again, we only need one pay stub or a VOE for salary or hourly wage earners, not multiple pay stubs and not both a pay stub and VOE, just one. Make sure to include all income for all household members. Reference pages 3 and 8 of the AHP and HSP Income Calculation Guide for income exclusions and exclusions. If the homebuyer is age 18 or older, but is not income earning, remember to have them sign a zero income certification. This document can be found on the Resources tab of the HSP public website. The ICW will populate a red font message if a zero income certification is needed, based on the information you entered regarding the household members. In the example on the slide, household member 2 is age 18 or older and has been disclosed as a non-income earner. As you can see at the bottom of section 1, a reminder appeared stating that a zero income certification should be submitted. Upload the signed zero income certification with the other income documentation as one PDF on the household income screen. Many times, income is not calculated correctly, which causes a large discrepancy between the year-to-date earnings calculation and the base wage calculation. Discrepancies of $3,000 or more require an explanation from the employer or correction. A red font message will appear under the highest calculated income if there is a large discrepancy. Do not submit the reservation request if a discrepancy exists unless it is accompanied by a reasonable explanation from the employer. Refer to page 6 of the income calculation guide for assistance with discrepancies. The income calculation slides on the training tab also provide helpful information regarding discrepancies. I highly recommend reviewing the income calculation slides as they provide useful and helpful information that will help you have a better understanding of how to calculate income. I know many of you attending the webinar today have been participating in HSP for several years and have a good understanding of the process. But for those of you that are new, this slide provides a step-by-step overview of the HSP process, from interviewing the household for HSP grant eligibility to funding of the disbursement request. More detailed step-by-step information about the process can be found on pages 27 and 28 of the HSP user guide. This concludes the webinar. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope that the information provided contributes to your success while participating in HSP. As always, utilize our guides and forms to learn more about HSP, and always feel free to contact us by phone or email if you can't find your answer in one of our guides. We look forward to working with you and wish you much success in 2021.